Hey, it's AZ, and you are listening to episode 119 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I am quickly approaching 2 years of hosting a podcast. Wow, just wow. I never thought I would do that, but here we are. Today's guest is two-time guest Fernando Montes, and we're going to say former exercise physiologist for LA County Fire Department. Fernando has now joined the ranks of the retired with AZ, although he's pretty much like AZ and he's busier now than he ever was before. I am going to direct you back to episode 111. If you haven't heard that one, go listen to that one first. But today we talked a lot about training loads on firefighters, occupational testing. We talked about medical screening, injury prevention, and also how to get the best candidates in our pipeline so that we pump out the best firefighters for our fire departments. This episode is amazing because Fernando's amazing. I thank him for his time, again, in such quick succession. It was really only about 6 weeks ago we recorded his first episode. So with that, I'm going to ask you, please get registered for 7-Minute Science. You know I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And please give us a rating and a review on the podcast. I really love reading those reviews. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Fernando!
Greetings.
Hi.
You've entered the I Love Me room.
Whoa, look at you. That's a lot of I love me.
I got to show you something now.
Okay. Whoa.
There's my badge.
That is huge. Is that a decal?
Well, what happened, the captain I worked with, we were educating him in reference to dealing in the fire service. And I used to say, if you don't have a badge, they don't listen to you.
True.
And it's all about the badge. So for my retirement, they made me the badge.
I feel like you probably needed that badge before your retirement, but better late than never.
Very true.
Fernando, I have some very pointed questions for you before we get to the real stuff. First things first, retirement. Are you digging it?
I'll tell you what, I'm working harder than a Home Depot part-time worker.
That's amazing.
Like a day laborer. I got more projects. We're blessed. We have 10 acres, and every day there's a new project list and stuff, and moving and unpacking, as you know, is interesting. People go, "Hey, how's your retirement?" I go, I don't know. I haven't really started. I've been working.
Now, I feel like both of us are probably going to work harder now than when we were actually employed. I don't know. And so based on your comment about the 10 acres, one of the very last things we talked about last time was your tiny dog. Is it Muttley?
Muttley.
Yeah. Give me the update on Muttley.
Muttley is 7 months old. He's weighing over 100 pounds. He thinks he's a lap dog. He's snoozing right now. It's just part of his daily. He snoozes all day and gets ready for the afternoon assault. So he's got big boy teeth now. So now he just grabs and pulls, and like he wants to play tug of war with any part of your body.
Oh no, that's dangerous.
No, he's good. You just talk to him and he's good. But we're enjoying him.
Awesome. I applied probably less than a week after when I moved here. I applied to be a volunteer dog walker at the shelter. Mm-hmm. And they assured me, they're like, it takes about a month because we have to do a background check and all this stuff. I think because it's in a police building. And it has now been, it's approaching 2 months and I'm getting like the dog shakes. I need a fix.
I hear you. I'm the same way. I mean, it's been a long time since I had dogs. When I lived in Texas, I had my Saints. And purposely we said, we're not going to have any more dogs until we retire. And so, Muttley showed up, and it's been an adventure.
People have told me they think that I should get a dog, but I think that I just should continue to be the crazy aunt that loves the dogs. That's what I think.
Well, you'll find your fix.
I'll find my fix. All right. Since you were so recently on the podcast, I am just going to refer the listeners back to the previous episode so they can learn everything that they need to know about who you are, what you do, what sets your soul on fire. But I was preparing for this podcast. I listened to our last episode doing some homework, and I came up with like 12 things that we could talk about. And then
Sure.
I looked at your I looked at your resume again and I circled 5 things that we didn't get to. So I'm going to pick and choose and also ask your opinion. So on your resume, I have circled medical screening for firefighters, peer support program, injury prevention, your OPAT test, and then training loads in recruit training tower. The last 2 are your research. Is there a particular one that you're like, yes, boom, we should start with that one?
I think we should start with training loads and recruit training. And
Yes,
I
let's
think
do it.
that's huge. But even before that, as a natural progression, what what I have found in talking to others in other agencies, and again, we're kind of a unique, just like New York is, and some of the larger departments. Um, when you run a recruit class of 300 or recruit class of 56, that's a large number of bodies versus 14, 12, 10, 20. So you have to put it into context. But what has to be evaluated is what is the organizational philosophy for the recruitment, the selection, assessment, and training of a recruit. Because again, you are starting this 30-year journey, 20-year journey, depending on the system. So no one shows up day one ready to be a fireman. There is a process, and that process requires a physical, mental, um, understanding of physiological side. So all these things need to be discussed. Like who are we selecting? Why? How do we assess them? What is our assessment process? Is it psychological? Is it mental? Is it physical? Combination of. So how do you screen your applicants? And that's a conversation that needs to happen because the threat to the fire service is what I would consider condition red, because of the generational issues that we see, and the military is dealing with that currently. Now, once you've come up with that philosophy and everybody understands that this is the kind of person we're trying to recruit, here's our assessments. Now, what is our preparatory phase? Because now this is the nuance that has to take place. The lack of physical and mental preparation weighs heavy on a recruit going in day one when he reports to recruit class. So you want to reduce your failures because again, there's a financial investment. So now, because of the generational gap that has taken place, physical gap, and as well as the mental gap, because they're not being stressed anymore. They have their timeout spaces, and so because of that, those are negative impacts to a person going into a recruit tower. So what we need to look at is, okay, what kind of preparatory assessment and training can we do to prepare them for their tower, their recruit date? So that again, you'd have to do an assessment, and that's where OPAT comes into play. And we can talk about OPAT a little later. You look at OPAT, you start to physically assess and train based on the needs of the individuals. And the one thing we see quite often is they lack the ability to recover, they lack power, they have poor mobility. So we have to look at what the data tells us and then build the framework so that that data actually has impact and development into that individual versus just getting them sweaty and dirty. Now you also, incorporate a little bit of introduction to the fire service, and then they show up day one prepared. Now, here's the question. During this preparatory phase, let's say that we have Anita Zapp, and she's been through the program, but she hasn't made the adjustment. She hasn't made the improvements. What's the next step for that person? Do you recycle or do you allow to continue? And that's where you have to put some serious barriers, because that has a higher potential based on what we've seen in OPAT of failure on the actual drill tower. So now you enter into the phase. Now, one of the things I'm critical is that you have to look at the fire side and look at it through the physiological stresses of a recruit. We know that there's physical and we know there's mental. So those are two areas we have to look at. How much in that training calendar on a day-to-day basis, what is the training load and how does that look like at the end of the week? When you look at training loads, you can do it two ways. You can do it from a physiological standpoint. You can do it from the mental standpoint. What's their recovery? Because again, we're trying to improve our success rate. We want every recruit coming through a tower to be the winner, to be that graduate that's going to be part of the organization. And here's the critical component is cadres should never be gatekeepers. Too many firefighters involved in recruit training think that they're the gatekeepers for the department. They in turn do an injustice to the department by being gatekeepers. Let the standards be the gatekeeper. Hold your standards high, that becomes the gatekeeper. Your job is to educate and teach. Now, with that said, and it fits exactly in the sports model, not every great athlete can teach. And not every firefighter, whether it's an officer or a probation, or excuse me, a basic firefighter, doesn't mean that they can become great instructors, because they've never been taught to be great instructors. Okay, so again, what's your educational component to being part of that cadre? So this is all part of how do we make a better mousetrap? And so when you have that ability to evaluate, train, and now look at on a daily basis, what is it we're trying to do on a daily basis? Okay. For us, first phase in LA County is basically ground week. They're going to do hose drags, they're going to throw BAs, they're going to throw ladders and knots. And the knots, again, training load on knots is not much. But the other ones, when you're going through that process on a daily basis, you start to look at loads. Now, the question now boils down to similar to sets and reps. Okay, when you first start off, are we hypertrophy? Are we going into strength? Are we going into power? We manipulate sets and reps and the intensity of the load to achieve the ultimate goal. If you look at that concept and put it into training concepts, now you start to build a model where you are starting with high volume and gradually reducing it to lower volume where they're getting ready for testing. So again, we're using our understanding of physical training and putting it into the fire concept or the educational component of what it is to be a firefighter. What is their requirements? So with that said, by not being a gatekeeper, it puts us in a great position, because this is the only time we truly have an opportunity to start to mold this round clay figure into a firefighter. Okay, we talk about behavioral health. Well, behavioral health starts way back with stress inoculation. So what do? We start to teach stress inoculation. What's your performance routine? What do you do on a daily basis to prepare yourself? Because it's about routines. What time do you go to bed? What time do you do your gear check? Your laundry, all the things that are part of being a successful candidate. How do we deal with arousal control, breathing, box breathing, 4x4, segmenting, all these things that are taught in sports psychology is what needs to be taught. Okay. Navy SEALs years ago, the SEAL community at the start of the GWAT utilized sports technology. And Eric Potterat at that time was naval commander down there at NSW, and he basically introduced sports psychology with a little military twist into the naval pipeline for special warfare. No different. It's the same exact necessity that we would put into firefighters. Now, here's the caveat. Because we know the stress load or we know the load for that particular environment, we can increase or decrease the stress load. And we can go, okay, today, Anita, what we're going to work on is I want you to visualize your hose lays, and let's work on that. Walk yourself through this process. And at the end of the training day or at the end of the week, there's a critique of, well, what did you think? How did you do? Okay, so now you're teaching a recruit during the process and having an active, stressful environment to teach them how to engage into the psychology of mental resiliency and mental fitness. And there's this constant feedback. Okay. Now all of a sudden you start to talk about behavioral health because this is the breeding ground where you start to integrate your behavioral health peer guys into this process so they understand what it is under the direction, hopefully, if you have one, of a sports performance psychologist. So now we talk about, fast forward, we're just going to jump off track here. We talk about the injection of peer performance or peer group support in behavioral health environment. Now they're both being integrated together. It's easier to now utilize that tool in my toolbox because I know how to do that. So you have an active educational ground while they're going through performance or while they're going through the recruit tower. So these are all things that you are working on. For example, let's say, one of the things we don't utilize enough is the FMS program. Let's evaluate movement, okay? Rather than just working them, why don't we work on improving their ability? Why? Because again, on the long term, injury prevention. If you're not assessing and checking those warts, those unchecked warts become a problem down the line. That's where they start to break. So by utilizing and understanding the training load, using the educational component, teaching them about movement, teaching them about recovery, all these things are laying the foundation for a successful career.
You said something in the first episode, and I'm so glad I wrote it down. You said, in the world of sports performance, it's about load management. And you followed that up with build your load accordingly.
Correct.
And here's the issue. The people that we're asking to build the load are not the right people to do it, I think, in some or most instances. Would you agree?
Totally, 100%.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that you said right around that time was, in terms of recovery and making sure that your candidates are recovering appropriately, you need to collect data. In my head this morning, while I was doing my workout, re-listening to the episode, I thought, okay, I'm a department that's not doing much right now, and I want to do better. What data should that department start with? What is an easy, low-hanging fruit for data collection?
Uh, with no money, you could do a daily questionnaire.
Easy.
Rating yourself from 1 to 5. How do you feel? Personal time, sleep, nutrition, performance, injury on a daily basis. All I got to do is make a check mark.
Yep.
And that allows you to get a quick snapshot. when you have the funds to work, you can use programs like Omega Wave, which was an HRV program, which we used for years. Uh, I've used it in recruit training, and I'll use it a lot extensively in our wildland academies. It gives you a snapshot of the individual. It gives you a snapshot of the group that day. And the one thing that I really loved about working with our wildland folks was they listened on a daily basis. We would sit down and go, hey, here's my three guys I need you to keep an eye on. Overall group today, they really suck today. And they would make the adjustments. The cadre would make the adjustments because they knew they had 21 days to get a individual ready for the world of wildland firefighting. So having that ability is huge. And then the other one is the ability to monitor sleep, whether you're using fatigue science or Aura rings. Those are key because you can just basically start to monitor sleep and recovery.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had just a few opportunities to work with the OSU OKC Campus Fire Academy recently. They were almost done with their 12-week academy when I got here, but so many of them told me they slept like 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
What? What?
And
No, children, no.
exactly. And again, there's the whole concept of the gatekeepers. You know, I saw the same thing in fire that I saw in baseball when I first started back in the 90s. We came in and we were bringing sports performance science to baseball. And you'd be in meetings and you start to talk, and the immediate response someone would say, well, when I played, and what
Yes.
that meant was they're putting up a yellow flag saying they're not uncomfortable in this conversation because they have no idea and they don't want to look bad. Okay. You push that forward when in fire, and we would be talking about philosophies, training programs, or any particular subjects, and immediately the response tended to be, well, when I went through the academy, that's the yellow flag. There's similarities in those, and it's not their fault. But the problem is they defer because their ego isn't in check. This isn't about questioning their ability or their knowledge. This is about enriching their knowledge, gaining information that they have, and coming up with a solution that is combined between the performance side and the fire side.
We talked a lot about not only recruiting bodies into the academy, which is a huge challenge because so very few people are even qualified anymore, but then keeping those bodies in the academy. Let's beat this up. Let's solve this problem right now. How do we get more qualified and competent candidates? Is it high school reach out? Is it, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Because the fire service is falling apart at the seams right now.
Correct. I think you have to first identify what is a ideal candidate. Just okay, we're going to build a stick figure. Who is that stick figure? Okay.
Yes.
The reality, and this is where the fire service cannot fall into the trap of being woke, because if you're 5'3" and you barely are over 120 pounds, this is going to be a physical challenging job, and this job is not for everybody. Okay, and enough of the kumbaya stuff, because at the end of the day, the person on your right and the person on your left expects you to be able to get them off the X. The community you serve isn't questioning whether you're 5'5", 6 feet, or whatever. They want you to show up and help them. So we have to be brutally honest of saying, this might not be the career for you. And once we get through that awful conversation, then we can start to build off of that. But we know right now, from a generational standpoint, they're physically and mentally not in the space we need them to be.
How do we get them there? Because I know that there were ever so many people when I was trying to get in the fire service. It was very competitive. Everyone wanted to do it. It's not as attractive of a job anymore. So, how do we wake up those kids and let them know that this is a great career, but this is how you have to get prepared? I think that's the secret sauce. And we could be really rich if we could figure it out.
Well, part of it, if you look at the Navy SEAL model, they have a series of, they do the aptitude test and then they do a physical test. And their numbers speak for themselves of people who qualify based on those two tests. And looking at some similar to like an OPAT of being able to go, you should be able to get at a minimum X score. If you can't, we recommend that you try again. Okay, and that's one of the challenges when you work for the departments, the bureaucracy of the government on hiring and stuff. That becomes a stumbling block. So you're going to have to figure out how they interpret that. But more importantly, is firefighting is again physical as well as mental. So you have to be able to do some physical assessments to go, you're physically not ready or you physically are. You can do a modified OPAT or you could do a whole OPAT. And the key is how well you sell this as recruiters. And I think that's the key. The other piece of this puzzle is a lot of departments have explorer programs. But the problem there is why are they not holding the explorer programs to a physical standard? That's not fair to that individual. Okay, if you're truly going to breed a recruiting pipeline using your explorer program, then that has to be special to be an explorer. You have to be physically ready. And that's part of our youth. They're not physically ready. So we have to take it upon ourselves to make up that or close that gap. We have to step into the breach of the physical and mental component that's missing in our future firefighters.
Mhm. That's all I got to say there is, how are we going to do it? I think this bridges very elegantly then into talking about the OPATs. Give me all of the information about your testing process.
Well, when I started with LA County, they used to do pull-ups, sit-ups, mile and a half run, and they would come out with the Iron Recruit. And I'm like, okay, I get the Iron Recruit side, the award, but what are you getting out of this data? Why are we doing this? And no one really had an answer. So we started to look at what was currently out there, and we'd already had success in our wildland hiring process when we brought in the beep test. And so one of the questions was being asked quite often by our training cadre on the structure side was, how do we get the beep test into the system where we're at? And so we started to build that. I said, we also need to look at an athletic assessment, what we're comfortable utilizing. So we looked at movement. So we came up with the Illinois agility test, number one. We looked at traditional pull-ups. We looked at core. Can you engage your core and your lower trunk? So we looked at knee tucks. Push-ups, we use a metronome. So you're getting a combination of a plank and a push-up. We wanted to see that. The key component was the beep test, VO2 max. We wanted to look at where you're at from that standpoint. We looked at power. What can you do with that 10-pound medicine ball? We looked also at, we wanted to see strength-wise where they were at. So we ended up with a 3-rep deadlift. And eventually we put it together. So potentially you have 800 points that you can score on this. So you had the beep test, Illinois agility, you had pull-ups, push-ups, you had knee tucks, medicine ball power, and the kettlebell carry. So at the end of the day, you had a potential 800 points to score on this test. Your percentage is going to be ranked based on your class. we saw consistently that if you were, and now again, you always had outliers who could have high totals and failed out. But we consistently saw people who were below 650 uh, would struggle. And when we say struggle, they'd either be injured or they would fail out on performance.
So tell the listeners, because some of them are right now Googling beep test in Illinois agility. Can you give kind of just the wave tops of what are those tests, how you do it, what do they mean?
The beep test basically is, excuse me, commonly seen in European sports theaters in field hockey, lacrosse, or excuse me, not lacrosse, but soccer, rugby. It's a very common test. And so we brought it into LA County specifically at one time to replace the test used as the pack test in our wildland division. And basically, it's a series of shuttle runs that are assigned based on a reduction in time in between reps, and it's 20 meters long, and it'll basically give us an estimated VO2 max of a field test, and it's very consistent. So we put that in as our kingpin. Thing that we were really concerned, we want to see movement, and individuals to me is if you can't move, then there's more of a problem that you're going to break. So the Illinois agility test was about movement. We want to see movement. And even though we know that 85 to 90% of the individuals fail, we wanted to see class by class, how do they move? Which ones is movement that successful in the positive side of the OPAT? And we found that it is. What's interesting is this last class that just going through right now that I left, it's a high FSA, meaning a lot of the individuals in that class are wildland people who work for us, and their agilities were off the charts. They move well, they run, they're very athletic. So we saw that, traditionally the deadlift, we wanted to see power, so we saw the medicine ball toss, kettlebell carry. Firemen got to carry equipment, and we want to see them be able to move under load. So again, traditional athletic type testing that also we wanted to be able to survive under scrutiny. And if somebody challenges that information, that we could defend it.
Your kettlebell carry, Fernando, was that based on a percentage of body weight or an absolute load?
Absolute load. It was 16 kilograms, if I remember correctly off the top of my head,
Okay,
and
gotcha.
total of 100 yards.
And then you said that if you didn't score above 650, what you observed was they would struggle either becoming injured or kind of washing out for poor performance. Did you publish any of this data?
Yes, there's actually is some data that's been published. Jay Dawes is part of that group.
Who? Jay Dawes?
Jay
Really?
Dawes, Jay Dawes, Rob Orr, and so they've had some of my data from there. The Fullerton group down at Cal State Fullerton with Dr. Lockie. We developed a great relationship and be able to feed off a lot of the data that we collected. Um, one of the projects that I was working on in the OPAT was to make it into an active app system. But again, we get the pushback of we have no money.
Mm, I gotcha. One of the other things that we chatted about before I go back to your resume, we chatted about buy in from leadership. And I can't remember the exact context in which we were referring to buy in from leadership. But I guess what I want to know is how do we convey the message that you and I have been talking about? Like the cadre is not the gatekeeper, load matters, recovery matters. We have to get the right people into the pipeline. How do we crunch that information into like a plate we can feed to leadership and they go, oh, it makes sense now?
They don't know what they don't know. And,
Yes.
I spent 10 years with LA County, and I'm willing to say I scratched the surface. And it's sad because I remember being told by our fire chief at times, "Hey, great job! You're doing a great job after a while and graduation." And I sat there and I thought about it. I says, "Chief, you don't even know what I do. You have no idea." And
Really?
and that's how I felt. Being brutally honest, is they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what we do professionally, and they don't take the time to do that. And the successful organizations, for whatever the reason is, they have had a aha moment. And you look at South Metro and so on like that. They had that chief is on my bucket list, man. I want to meet the guy because
Let's meet out there and go have lunch with Chief Baker.
oh, I'd love to. Um, that's the leadership right there. And one of our challenges is we're not at the table. I'm a force multiplier. I left this department with 10 years after working 40 years plus in the human performance realm. And during my time there, right before I left, no one even asked, "Hey, let's sit down and do a debrief. Tell us where we need to go."
Damn.
And I told my captain that. I said, I'm not expecting you to do anything with this, but it tells me what they think about what we do and the support we don't get because they have no idea. So how we fix that is we have to find our rabbis, as they call it, are people who will help bridge those conversations, the people who will speak for us in order for us to be heard. Because, as you well know, there's a moat around fire chiefs, and everybody is protected of their time. You know, I'm from the old school. I want to go knock on your door and come in and have a cup of coffee. Let's talk. Um, and again, they don't know what they have. So we have to find people who can be the champions for us to open that door, because the decisions that are made that affect firefighters, we look at it from a different perspective. I mean, one of my battles I had was with some of the female chiefs who felt that they knew better in reference to the female candidate. But yet we have a high rate of failure of the female candidate. And the reason being is they're physically not prepared for it. Okay. That's not a knock on them. It's just the reality on the ground. But again, the challenges of you're stepping into someone's area and they get very protective. Whereas if you have the support and you have a chief who's going to sit there and go, "This is the way it is. Your job is to do this. His job is to do that. Let's move." And so, the challenges is dealing with the gold badges.
Fernando, I think I might be people. I might be the people to bridge the gap between the human performance and the chief, because maybe they'll listen to a firefighter.
Very true. But you also have the platform. And I praise that, the fact that people listen to this, and it causes a pause. You know what? That's what I want. I need a pause. I need somebody to go, that's why we're having these problems. Okay. One of the things that happened to us a while back was we had a really bad incident at one of our fire stations where an individual had an ongoing issue with another individual firefighter and showed up at work one day and killed the individual. And immediately the board of supervisors pushed resources and support, and our behavioral health side just flourished. But what about the rest of us? What they don't understand is if you're going to run a wellness program or a human performance program, it is a total program. It's not a silo. And so again, you got to remember, fire departments in general, the community, it's top-down leadership. Okay. Everybody has their little silos. And when you look at the WFI and you look at all those are in silos. They're not holistically designed to interact with each other. Again, usually because of circumstances, things get created.
I had the opportunity to speak to the Tennessee fire chiefs. Oh, it'd be almost 2 weeks ago now about. I was actually filling in for Mandy Nice. She had accidentally double booked herself. And so the format of the talk, like the title and the description, was already there for me. And then I just put in sort of my spin on it. But the thing that I told them in terms of fitness and nutrition, because that was the scope of the talk, please don't wait until your department has their wake up moment. If I can leave you with any message, you need to start today. Don't wait for 5 years from now when someone dies on duty from a cardiovascular event. Start today. Do something.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, those fire chiefs listened. All right. I want to go on to one more rabbit hole if you have time. And I think we can combine two of these things together. Maybe not. You let me know. Can we talk about medical screening and injury prevention together, or should we talk about those entirely separately?
No, I think they work hand in hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Tell me all of the things.
the biggest thing is when you look at NFPA 1582 and you start to evaluate the candidate's medical assessment, okay, we have to look at that through a different lens. We have to look at it from a performance standpoint, understanding that firefighting is performance. So we're talking now performance medicine. What is it that you have to do in order to be successful as a firefighter? And if we're using the medical model, then that assessment needs to be dead on. One of the challenges we had in LA County was we weren't utilizing all of NFPA 1582. We were doing a modified assessment. Well, then you wonder why people are failing our beep test when they would show up at the academy. Well, that should have been failed out way back during their medical. So again, look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint. Okay. So by utilizing that correctly and having a good foundation, now to me, the addition of the specific muscle assessment, the FMS program, those are all part of the equation that need to be added into the assessment from a medical standpoint. Because again, you want to utilize what you find, have a recommendation that allows them now to start that process of injury prevention. Because what you're doing in your assessment is you're looking for potential issues that will prevent you from being successful. We had a young lady that got through recruit training who was missing a ACL. She was ACL deficient. And I remember
Thanks.
watching her drag her leg across the grinder, and I said, "Come here, what's going on?" And she told me. Now, I give her all the kudos for surviving that, but we're going to eat that cost down the line because it's going to rear its head and do more damage. But she got through the medical. How do you get through the medical? So again, it goes back to we have to look at it like you do professional sports. When we make a trade in baseball or we're signing somebody that, you go to the combine or, you get assessed, they're looking at all kinds of things. We have to do the same thing because if we don't, people slip through and two things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to end up in your workman's comp system. Or the worst part about it is they potentially can get injured or severely injured to a point of, being killed because they physically have some issues. So we have to go back to the basics and go, we can build a better mousetrap because there's already some out there.
So we need to do two things. We need to beef up the pipeline, and we need to make the doors into the fire service a little more narrow so that we catch the things that are going to create a problem for the person or the agency, I
Right.
think.
Right.
Holy cow, how are we going to do it?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, there are so many things that need to be addressed. But I think, as I said in the beginning, when you sit down and create a working philosophy for your department, that's the start. Start with the basics and then start to build off of that.
I think words are so hard right now. Almost all departments have this paragraph that sums up their philosophy. What is that called? Fernando, help me with the words.
Oh, you're talking about
Mission
their,
statement.
their, their, their core values, their mission statement.
Yes, yes, yes. So they have that for the public. But I think maybe they need to go behind the scenes and say, what is our mission statement for our personnel, and what is our core values for our personnel, and start there.
Well, the other thing too is stop and think historically how much money is spent on preventative maintenance on the apparatus,
Oh,
and how much money do they spend on the prevention and maintenance of the human platform.
you are in my head because I was just writing down link to the episode about return on investment where I talk about apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. I know you're real busy being retired. I'm super busy being retired. So I want to be respectful of your time. But is there any other little rabbit holes or points that we should have made to any agencies or individuals out there that are listening today?
I truly believe, whether it's the structure side or wildland side, is we need to take a step back and understand the external threat to the manpower that is needed to run a fire department, because that spigot is going to dry up. And either you lower standards, which we know what will happen once you do that, or you have to take a serious look at how do we prepare to handle the next generations of firefighters. You got to set the table up for success. And right now, no one wants to have that conversation. No one. And so we have to do that. We have to sit down and you know talk about the 300-pound gorilla sitting in the corner of the room and be brutally honest. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed when I was working in the special ops community with those guys, is they were brutally honest. And it was like, don't take it personal, take note. And because it's not personal. And the same thing here is that we're not challenging their careers or their fortitude for becoming firefighters. It's we bring a different perspective, a different view, a different lens to this fight. And if you don't listen to us, you're going to pay on the back end, after you leave, because it's just going to continue to deteriorate. So that's an ongoing threat. All you got to do is look at the military. They have that problem now. And why would you think that we're not going to have that problem? Our data has already proven that. So I think that's the key is we have to continue to educate, to get the professions involved in the fire service. I also think we have to educate our profession of going, it's not always sets and reps, it's about performance. At the end of the day, no one cares how much you can bench. No one cares what you can squat. It's about, can you perform the duties. And so it's just part of constant education out there to the masses, whether it's in our profession or the fire community, is utilizing every opportunity to drive that message home. Is, are we prepared for the next threat? Just like you prepare for fire season, are we prepared for that threat, the human performance threat?
I don't know how this stuff just comes out of your mouth, but you said, and I quote, we need leadership to step back and understand the external threats and the manpower needed to run a department. Drop the mic.
See, that's
What?
what happens when you spend 40 years doing this.
It just comes out of your mouth. Like,
Yeah.
cheapers. Would take me all day to formulate such a well spoken thought.
Well, and like I said, if I have one regret, I want to say I just didn't have the opportunity to be in that position to have these conversations, because it wasn't a priority on their side. And yeah, it's just, it's one of those regrets.
But we're having them now. And as you stated, you are a force multiplier, even though you are retired. You are
Oh,
still a force multiplier.
without a doubt, there is a lot of experience there and a lot of opportunities that were missed, but hopefully they're not missed again, and others can continue to carry forth that torch. And like I said, I commend you and your efforts that you're going through this process here and having this podcast. It's great. I mean, I love it.
Well, I love having you as a guest, and there's still more on this sheet that we can talk about. So I will bother you and hit you up again, but not too soon because you're busy being retired.
Oh, no problem. I
Um,
mean, like I said, the nice thing about being retired is if you don't want to do something today, you don't have to. You know?
isn't it the best?
Oh yeah, pop a beer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's like, yeah.
I went and bought, I was having couch commitment issues. Some of the things I had to leave in Illinois because they were just too big. And I have gym equipment, which is more important than a couch. And so I had to leave my lovely couch in Illinois. And I was just having the hardest time selecting a couch. And I finally got over my commitment issues and I went to the Love Sack store. Um, yeah, I spent way too much money on this couch, but hopefully it's going to last me for the rest of my life and it should be delivered next week. More to follow. But
There
this is
you
what I
go.
do when I'm retired. I go to the Love Sack store at noon on a Thursday.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
Isn't that fantastic? All right, listeners, this has been part two with my friend Fernando Montes. I'm so glad you tuned in today. Please share the podcast with someone who can use it. And I think Fernando and I are going to drop the mic and go be retired. Deal?
Deal.
Deal. Thanks, Fernando. Have a great day.
Thank you.